In the mid-50s, rock and roll was just emerging onto the popular music landscape as wider audiences began to discover the energy and vitality of rhythm and blues records. Little Richard is undoubtedly one of the most influential songwriters in rock and roll history. While many of the first rock and roll performers like Elvis Presley performed covers of songs written by others, Little Richard was both a performer and a songwriter. One of his most important hits was the song Tutti Frutti, which he co-wrote with Dororthy LeBostrie. A last-minute effort to sanitize the song resulted in the now iconic track, which inspired generations of musicians and taught 50s audiences how to rock and roll.
Tutti Frutti, oh Rudy, oh I got a girl named Sue.
Hello there, it's Warren Hewitt here. I hope you're doing marvellously well. Welcome back to another episode in the series. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have a new video. If you're into production, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Little Richard was born Richard Wayne Penniman on December the 5th, 1932, in Macon, Georgia. He was the second of 12 children. His father was a church deacon, in addition to being a brick mason, owning a nightclub and selling bootleg moonshine on the side. His family was involved with various Christian denominations throughout his childhood, Baptist, AME, and Pentecostal, and were very active members. His grandfather and two uncles were also preachers. The Pentecostal church was especially influential on Penniman's early years. He was drawn into the charismatic style of the worship and to the music he heard at the services. Despite his active participation in the music of the church, Penniman's father disapproved of his son's musical style and suspected homosexuality. He kicked his own son out of home at the age of 13. Penniman worked the concession stand at Macon City Auditorium, where he was exposed to all the musical talent that came to his hometown, and soon began performing at the local TikTok club. After winning a local talent contest, he was signed to RCA in 1951. This first break did not result in the great career success that Penniman had envisioned. The mild-mannered rhythm and blues recordings he made were lovely performances, but they did not reveal the vibrant showmanship for which he would later become known.
Taxi, taxi, take me anywhere. Taxi, taxi, take me anywhere.
His true breakthrough came when he teamed up with Art Rupert, founder of Specialty Records. According to Rupert, Penniman was repeatedly calling the office, asking why no one had responded about the tape that he had sent in. Finally, Rupert and his A&R man at the time, Richard Bumps Blackwell, decided to go downstairs and give the tape a listen.
After about 4 or 5 calls, I guess he got a little huffy on the phone and insisted on talking to me. And either the secretary or one of them got a little nervous and turned it over to me. He said, I've been calling you and blah, blah, blah for months and you don't give me an answer. And I went down to Bumps. I said, Bumps, did we ever get a tape from Little Richard? And he said, I don't know, who's he? And he went into our box where we periodically at the end of a month or so would return all those we rejected. And we found a tape wrapped in brown wrapping paper, and it said return. It had Little Richard on it. I said, this guy's driving us crazy. Let's listen to this again.
Penniman's persistence paid off. Rupert sent Blackwell to hear Penniman with the permission to begin recording if he liked what he heard. And that's exactly what he did.
I was down there and I was so tired. I was tired. If you ever seen anybody tired, I was tired, y'all. Lloyd Price had put out a blues hit called Lord and Miss Claudie. And he came through my hometown, Macon, Georgia, in a gold and black Cadillac with a towel on the back of it. I thought he was going to roll it down the street, but he didn't. Oh, God. And he came over there to me and he said, now we're going to make this tape and send this little tape up here to Specialty Records. I made the tape, sent it on up to Specialty, and they waited 2 years before they came to see me. Bumps Blackwell, they did it. Then they met me down in New Orleans, Louisiana, wanted me to sing like Ray Charles, and I refused. And when they got down there, he got Tutti Frutti, although he had to clean it up, but he got it.
Details on the origin of Tutti Frutti vary, with both credited writers claiming after the fact to have written the song by themselves. The commonly accepted version is that LeBostrie was brought in to clean up the lyrics to a bawdy number that Little Richard often performed live, but which was too risque for recorded music in the 1950s. The story begins with Penniman in the recording studio feeling a little frustrated that he hadn't been able to capture the same feel of his live performance. Blackwell recalled, "The first session was to run 6 hours and we planned to cut 8 sides. Richard ran through the songs on his audition tape. So far so good. But it wasn't really what I was looking for. I heard that Richard's stage act was really wild, but in the studio that day he was very inhibited. So they headed over to the Dewdrop Inn, where Little Richard found himself an audience and a piano. He broke into a wild performance of Tutti Frutti, and Blackwell knew he had found their hit. The problem was that the lyrics were not going to work for radio play. So Blackwell asked LeBostrie to come in and clean them up a bit. I said to her, look, you come and write some lyrics to this, because I can't use the lyrics that Richard's got. He had some terrible words in there. Well, Richard was embarrassed to sing the song, and she was not certain that she wanted to hear it. Time was running out, and I knew it could be a hit. I talked using every argument I could think of, and finally I convinced them. Richard turned to face the wall and sung 2 or 3 times, and Dorothy listened. LeBostrie went into another room to quickly write the lyrics which Penniman recorded, "Directly from my heart to you," and "I'm just a lonely guy." With only 15 minutes left in the session, and Richard left with almost no voice, LeBostrie returned with the new lyrics. Little Richard stepped up to the piano and made rock music history. Tutti Frutti was recorded on September the 14th, 1955, at J&M Studios in New Orleans. J&M was home to many of early rock and roll's foundational recordings, not only by Little Richard, but also those of Fats Domino and Guitar Slim. J&M's founder, Cossimo Matassa, was even inducted as a non-performer into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his contributions to rock and roll's earliest recordings. Many of the session musicians who played on Tutti Frutti are the same musicians who played on Fats Domino's records, among others. This includes tenor saxophonist Lee Allen, who has been hailed as one of the defining sounds of rock and roll and one of the DNA strands of rock. Alan Red Tyler played baritone saxophone. Frank Fields played double bass, and Earl Palmer was on drums. Justin Adams played guitar on the track. Pianist Huey Smith was hired for the session and performed on many of these early tracks. However, with the last-minute addition of Tutti Frutti to the sessions, and only a few minutes left to record, there was no time to teach Smith the part, and Little Richard performed the piano for the song. Blackwell explained, there had been no chance to write an arrangement, so I had to take the chance on Richard playing the piano himself. That wild piano was essential to the success of the song. It was impossible for the other piano players to learn it in the short time that we had. I put a microphone between Richard and the piano and another inside the piano, and we started to record it. It took 3 takes, and in 15 minutes we had it, Tutti Frutti. And it is his energetic piano playing that really carries the track. The song itself is not complicated. Rocked up 12-bar blues, extremely traditional in form and structure. But what makes it really special, however, is Richard's driving piano and the vigor of his vocal performance. His aggressive playing on the piano is the sound which really started the rock and roll revolution. His hoops and hollers set him apart from the rest of the nascent rock and roll landscape, which is largely merging pop's crooning warmth with rhythm and blues rhythmic vitality. Tutti Frutti was released by Specialty in October of 1955, only a few weeks after recording. By December, the song had reached the Billboard Rhythm and Blues charts, and by February of 1956, it had risen to number 2. In 1955, African-American artists like Little Richard faced the added struggle of constant competition of cover versions by white artists. Pat Boone's Tutti Frutti was released shortly after Richard's and reached number 12 on the pop charts. Little Richard's version also crossed over to the pop charts, but only reached number 21. If Penniman's original lyrics were sanitized for recording purposes, Boone's team took it to a whole new level. After Penniman's 2016 death, Boone reflected on the process of changing the lyrics for 50s radio sensibilities. I took a liberty now and then and changed the lyric. The hard part about Long Tall Sally was singing it in such a way that I didn't draw attention to the fact that Sally was not Uncle John's wife. Uncle John saw Aunt Mary coming and he ducked away in the alley because he was there with Long Tall Sally. I didn't want to be asked what that was about. The subject matter was more of a problem for me with Tutti Frutti. Some of the words like, "She knows how to love me, yes indeed, you don't know what you do to me," sounded a little racy. So I changed it to "Pretty Little Susie is the gal for me." This was the mid-50s after all, and pop hits were required to be family friendly. Nevertheless, Little Richard struggled with Boone's success, sometimes reflecting on how it had impacted his own by bringing his song to wider audiences, and other times lamenting the racial tensions of the time and the suppression his song experienced when it was easier for record executives to just hire a white artist to cover and piggyback off of his songwriting and style. Undoubtedly, Penniman had created a classic song and everyone was drawn to it. Elvis Presley also covered Tutti Frutti in March of 1956, and the Beatles included it as part of their live set in their early touring days. Queen even played it on tour in the 80s. It is certainly one of rock and roll's foundational tracks and a song that changed popular music history forever. It was voted number 1 on Mojo's 2007 list of the top 100 records that changed the world, declaring it the sound of the birth of rock and roll. The US Library of Congress National Recording Registry added Little Richard's original version to its registry in 2010, explaining that its unique vocalization over the irresistible beat announced a new era in music. Little Richard has famously called himself the king and queen of rock and roll, and certainly he has a claim to the throne. With tracks like Tutti Frutti, he transformed the popular music landscape of the 50s, creating rhythm and blues tracks that would not only cross over onto popular charts, but truly inspire generations of listeners and musicians to come. His more lasting moniker as the architect of rock and roll is certainly fitting. He laid the foundation for what rock and roll was to be and continued to challenge musicians and listeners to keep up as he remained performing across his lifetime. Thanks ever so much. If you haven't already, please check out the other videos in the series and let us know who else you want to hear about down below. Thanks ever so much for watching. Have a marvelous time. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, adio, tschüss, goodbye.